And they said to one another, "Who is this, that even the wind and sea obey him?" We'll stand and sing to God's praise, number 42. Number 42, command your blessing from above, O God, on all assembled here. Number 42, as the piano begins, you'll stand ready for singing, command your blessing. Now I'll read to you from the Bible, the Old Testament, the book of Leviticus, and chapter 18. Leviticus chapter 18. Beginning at verse 6. No one is to approach any close relative to have sexual relations. I am the Lord. Do not dishonor your father by having sexual relations with your mother. She is your mother. Do not have relations with her. Do not have sexual relations with your father's wife. That would dishonor your father. Do not have sexual relations with your sister, either your father's daughter or your mother's daughter, whether she was born in the same home or elsewhere. Do not have sexual relations with your son's daughter or your daughter's daughter. That would dishonor you. Do not have sexual relations with the daughter of your father's wife, born to your father. She is your sister. Do not have sexual relations with your father's sister. She is your father's close relative. Do not have sexual relations with your mother's sister, because she is your mother's close relative. Do not dishonor your father's brother by approaching his wife to have sexual relations. She is your aunt. Do not have sexual relations with your daughter-in-law. She is your son's wife. Do not have relations with her. Do not have sexual relations with your brother's wife. That would dishonor your brother. Do not have sexual relations with both a woman and her daughter. Do not have sexual relations with either her son's daughter or her daughter's daughter. They are her close relatives. That is wickedness. Do not take your wife's sister as a rival wife and have sexual relations with her while your wife is living. Do not approach a woman to have sexual relations during the uncleanness of her monthly period. Do not have sexual relations with your neighbor's wife and defile yourself with her. Do not give any of your children to be sacrificed to Molech, for you must not profane the name of your God. I am the Lord. Do not lie with a man, as one lies with a woman. That is detestable. Do not have sexual relations with an animal and defile yourself with it. A woman must not present herself to an animal to have sexual relations with it. That is a perversion. And there we'll leave the reading for tonight. You might remember from last time that Leviticus chapter 17, verse 1, marks the beginning of a new section. And now we have 4 chapters full of laws. Laws about life outside the tabernacle. But remember from last time, we mustn't overdo the break. The division at chapter 17, verse 1. The whole of Leviticus is about the tabernacle. It's about earth dwellers going to heaven in the tabernacle and tasting the presence of God. One day, heaven and earth will be the same place. Remember Revelation chapter 21, verse 3. And I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, now the dwelling of God is with men, and he will dwell with them. Now the dwelling of God is with men. Heaven and earth are one place. That's the heaven that you and I are looking forward to. Not a heaven for God and an earth for us, but heaven on earth. Now the dwelling of God is with men, and he will live with them. And when he says dwelling, what he actually says is tabernacle. Now the tabernacle of God is with men, and God will tabernacle with them. But back in the days of Aaron and Moses, and in our day, 2023, heaven and earth are not one place. God is in heaven, and we are on earth. But the Lord gives to men and women, to earth dwellers, tastes, experiences of heaven and the presence of God and meeting with God. And that's what the tabernacle is, a little heaven on earth. But if you are going to meet with God inside the tabernacle and taste the presence of God, see the glory of God inside the tabernacle, then what happens outside the tabernacle matters very much. You could say that life outside the tabernacle is preparation for what's going to happen inside the tabernacle. And I think there's real truth in that in Leviticus, but the bigger truth is that life outside the tabernacle flows from life inside the tabernacle. Holy life outside the tabernacle flows from meeting with the holy God inside the tabernacle. And that's what we found last week in chapter 17. Blood outside the tabernacle. How you handle blood outside the tabernacle is controlled by the fact that inside the tabernacle, blood has atoning power. Now, last week we had to pause there for a moment. What do we mean, blood has atoning power? But that is what Leviticus 17 says. It's the blood that makes atonement. But because it's the blood that makes atonement inside the tabernacle, blood is a very precious thing, even outside the tabernacle. Even the blood of animals, a precious, precious thing, because of blood inside the tabernacle. Now, this week, the laws in chapter 18 for life outside the tabernacle are all about sexual relations. You see that word all the way through chapter 18, sexual relations. Sexual relations. What the Hebrew Bible says literally is uncover the nakedness. You shall not uncover the nakedness of your mother or your father's sister and so on. Uncover the nakedness of. That's the language of Leviticus 18. But nobody disputes the meaning. The chapter is all about sexual relations. Verse 6 pretty much summarizes the whole chapter. No one is to approach any close relative to have sexual relations. I am the Lord. And then what you have is 14 examples of close family relationships in which there are not to be sexual relations. And then there are 3 laws. Beyond those 14 examples, there are 3 laws which don't fit under the heading of verse 6. Verse 6, don't approach a close relative for sexual relations. All those laws amplifying that. And then 3 laws which are a little different. Verse 21, do not give any of your children to be sacrificed to Molech, for you must not profane the name of your God. I am the Lord. And that's the one law in the chapter that seems to have nothing to do with sexual relations. But because it's in chapter 18, it probably does have something to do with sexual relations. Sacrificing your children to Molech is sin enough, of course. But there probably was a sex act in the procedure, in the perverted worship. That's verse 21. Verse 22, do not lie with a man as one lies with a woman. That is detestable. So it's sexual relations again, but not now concerned with close relatives. Notice that all the laws of chapter 18 are directed to the male of the household. The assumed you of each law is the man. And that becomes extra obvious in verse 22. Do not lie with a man as one lies with a woman. That is detestable. The assumed addressee is the male of the household. And then there's verse 23. Do not have sexual relations with an animal and defile yourself with it. A woman must not present herself to an animal to have sexual relations with it. That is a perversion. There are those three slightly different laws at the end there. Now, I want to highlight three things from the chapter tonight. And first of all, I want you to notice what God's concern is. What is God's concern in chapter 18? It is, with whom does one have sexual relations? But more exactly, his concern is boundaries. Boundaries. Now, if you can come up with a better word or a phrase, that would be good. I'm going to try and tell you now what I mean by boundaries. There is in chapter 18 the boundary of a family, inside which you must not look for sexual relations. You're inside that family. You must look outside that family for sexual relations. You look over the wall, over the boundary of your family. And that particular boundary makes up most of the chapter. That takes up most of the chapter. But there are some more boundaries. There's the boundary of sex. My own sex, your own sex. And I mustn't look for sexual relations inside that boundary. I must look over the wall, over the boundary, to the other sex. There's just one verse about that, verse 22. Do not lie with a man as one lies with a woman. That is detestable. And then thirdly, there's the boundary of species. I belong to the species of human beings, and so I mustn't look outside of that boundary, over the wall, for sexual relations. I must keep within my species. That's verse 23. Do not have sexual relations with an animal and defile yourself with it. A woman must not present herself to an animal to have sexual relations with it. That is a perversion. And so, first of all, we've just tried to spell out what is God's concern in Leviticus 18. With whom does one have sexual relations? And those boundaries are his concern. Now, the second thing I want to highlight tonight is this, just how concerned God is about this subject. With whom do you have these relations? Which boundaries and walls must I look over for sexual relations? Which boundaries, walls must I stay inside? Those things matter very much to God. It's a deep concern. And I say that for three reasons. First of all, he gives a whole chapter to it. He gives all these laws. Clearly, it matters. Secondly, we can say it matters because of where the chapter comes. The chapter comes in the middle of Leviticus. Leviticus is all about the tabernacle. It's all about heaven on earth, meeting with God. And so, in other words, observing the boundaries of sexual relationships outside the tabernacle is essential in God's eyes. For what goes on inside the tabernacle. And meeting with God inside the tabernacle leads to observing the boundaries outside the tabernacle. And its place then in Leviticus tells us this really matters to God. He's given us a whole chapter. The place in the book, the relationship to tabernacle and meeting with God. You can't meet with God in the tabernacle, he says to the Israelites, and then go out and forget my boundaries. You can't forget my boundaries and then come to the tabernacle. And then something else points to how important this is inside God. And it is that what you discover in the tabernacle as you meet with God, what you discover is that the boundaries are not just laws which God invents. The boundaries and the laws come from deep inside who God is and what God is like. They come from his nature. And that's why you have this refrain, this repetition through the chapter, I am the Lord. Verse 4, you must obey my laws and be careful to follow my decrees. I am the Lord your God. Verse 5, keep my decrees and laws, for the man who obeys them will live by them. I am the Lord. Verse 6, no one is to approach any close relative to have sexual relations. I am the Lord. Verse 21, do not give any of your children to be sacrificed to Moloch and so on. I am the Lord. Verse 30, keep my requirements and do not follow any of the detestable customs that were practiced before you came, and do not defile yourselves with them. I am the Lord your God. Do you see, the whole chapter is predicated on this. I am the Lord. It is because I am who I am that the boundaries are so essential. Now, I wish I could take that further and say, this is how the boundaries show up inside God's nature. We're saying they come from God's nature. And I wish I could go further and shine a spotlight on God's nature in certain scriptures and say, do you see where these boundaries come from? Inside God. This is what the Israelites discovered about God when they met with him in the tabernacle. They discovered there, of course, these boundaries will matter so much to him. We've seen what he's like. And I haven't got there yet, but I still believe the point is, the boundaries come from right inside God's nature. I am the Lord. I am the Lord. That is what they rest on. That's where they've come from. Not arbitrary laws. He hasn't scratched his head to think, now, what shall I ask them to do and not to do? No, these come from his nature, from who he is, from what he's like. And the third thing then I want to say tonight, and you might be expecting this now, the third thing is that the boundaries matter very much to God still. The boundaries matter still. God is as concerned today as ever he was about with whom does one have sexual relations. He's concerned that his boundaries are observed. And you might say, well, of course he is. if they come from his nature, from I am the Lord, of course they still matter to him. But there is another reason for saying why they still matter. Notice now how the chapter begins and how it ends. Leviticus chapter 18, the first 5 verses. The Lord said to Moses, "Speak to the Israelites and say to them, I am the Lord your God. You must not do as they do in Egypt, where you used to live, and you must not do as they do in the land of Canaan, where I am bringing you. Do not follow their practices. You must obey my laws and be careful to follow my decrees. I am the Lord your God. Keep my decrees and laws, for the man who obeys them will live by them. I am the Lord." And then come to the end of the chapter from verse 24. "Do not defile yourselves in any of these ways, because this is how the nations that I am going to drive out before you became defiled. Even the land was defiled. So I punished it for its sin, and the land vomited out its inhabitants. But you must keep my decrees and my laws. The native born and the aliens living among you must not do any of these detestable things, for all these things were done by the people who lived in the land before you, and the land became defiled. And if you defile the land, it will vomit you out, as it vomited out the nations that were before you. Everyone who does any of these detestable things, such persons must be cut off from their people. Keep my requirements, and do not follow any of the detestable customs that were practiced before you came, and do not defile yourselves with them. I am the Lord your God." The Israelites are between Egypt and Canaan. They've come out of Egypt, they're on their way to Canaan, they're in the wilderness. And sexual relations among the Israelites must not be like sexual relations among the Egyptians, where they've come from. And sexual relations must not be like sexual relations among the Canaanites, where they're going. The Israelites must observe God's boundaries. But just notice what the Lord says about the people of Canaan. Canaan, the Israelites are going to occupy Canaan. God is going to drive out the Canaanites. But notice why the Lord will drive them out. Verse 24, "Do not defile yourselves in any of these ways, because this is how the nations that I am going to drive out before you became defiled. Even the land was defiled. So I punished it for its sin, and the land vomited out its inhabitants. But you must keep my decrees and my laws," and so on. The Canaanites have broken, the Egyptians too, but he's concentrating now on the Canaanites. They've broken the laws of Leviticus 18. And you could say, but they never had the laws of Leviticus 18. They hadn't had them from Sinai. They hadn't had them from Moses, but they had them. And God judged them for not keeping them. They had them in their souls, because God had written these laws in the DNA of the whole human race. Remember what Paul says in Romans 2. He says, "The Gentiles show that the requirements of the law are written on their hearts." The Gentiles who never had the laws of Moses from Sinai, from Old Testament scriptures, They had the laws written on their hearts. They knew. It was a knowledge that they trampled on, abused. It was diminished, I'm sure, but it was there. And God judged them for their breaking these laws, defiling the land. That's why he drives out the Canaanites. We're saying these laws are in the DNA of the human race because they come from the deepest nature of God. They matter to him still. Now, the next two chapters, you might like to look ahead. We won't go there now. The next two chapters are going to be more difficult. Chapters 19 and 20. But about chapter 18, I'm saying, God's concern about sexual relations in this chapter is the boundaries we cross and don't cross. That's his concern. His concern runs very deep. I am the Lord. That's where they come from. And he's still concerned today. And there we'll leave it. We'll leave it there. We'll sing together from the Black Book, number 55. O great God of highest heaven, occupy my lowly heart. As Deborah begins, let's stand to sing 55. Chris, if you could turn the YouTube on.